Mode. As the world is on fire over the darkness of racial injustice across North America, we have been thinking together as Jews through this period, how are we meant to respond? And as we come to Yom Kippur and we reach the prophetic passage in Isaiah's Haftorah from his chapter 58, especially 6 through 9, we are beginning to ask this question in a deeper way. That prophetic tradition also starts earlier in Isaiah in 49:6 with his clarion call to all of us to be a light unto the nations. And not only do we follow that prophetic path of Isaiah, but we are said to walk in the footsteps of our teacher, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who marched with Dr. Martin Luther King in Selma, Alabama. And at this time now of introspection, this time of reflection, the deepest moment of Yom Kippur, when we read this Haftorah, I wanted to extend a conversation to a friend of our community who is going to tell you his story and also share some of his reflections as a springboard from this Haftorah. His name is Shilo Leon ben Avraham, also known as Francois Bugingo, and I welcome him to this conversation. And Francois, I wanted to start with the first question, and first of all, to thank you for spending the time with us. I know we've been spending a lot of time together in synagogue, but maybe you can first tell me, where does your story begin to become Shilo Leon ben Avraham and this extended family of Noah, Andre, Kenzo, as well as Ethan and Maya, the entire clan, along with Sarah Miriam. Where does your story begin? And from there, let's take a look at the Haftarah and the question of Isaiah for this moment of Yom Kippur.
Yeah, it has been really a very long journey, and I'm glad I finally made it. Thanks to Rabbi Moses, who was my teacher during my conversion class. I would say, and I believe that I really began to be a Jew, even though I hadn't that status when I witnessed the genocide in Rwanda. Actually, to fully understand my story, I was born a refugee in a Rwandan refugee from both parents in Congo. You know, the country that Trump used to call a shithole country. So I came from a shithole country as a shithole citizen, the second citizen in that country, in Congo, not even in the main city, Kinshasa, but in the third city in the middle of the jungle called Kisangani. My parents, who were from Rwanda, had been expelled after the first genocide that took place in 59. Most of people don't know about it. They know about the 94 genocide, but the first one took place in 59. And in 94, they will kill children and elders because they say the one that you spared in 59 took the weapons 35 years later, and they came and they became rebel movement that is trying to free Rwanda. So no mercy for anybody. So when I was born, I knew that I was a Rwandan, but I was not allowed to make any trip to Rwanda in any form whatsoever. That was the obligation. So I got this chance to get there in 94. As a journalist, I was 20 years old, and I was invited to cover the genocide. I was working for a French human rights organization called Reporters Without Borders. And after a very horrible day where we had to pay some free money to help some people who were going to be killed by bullets instead of being macheted, where you feel like you have no purpose in life if the only use that you have in life is to pay for people to be killed in a gentler way rather than the regular torture. I was sitting in my hotel room, and there was this guy whose name is Bernard-Henri Lévy, who's a French philosopher who happened to be in Rwanda at the same time. So he saw me, and I was drinking heavily because that's the only way that you could swipe the memory of the things that you had witnessed that day. He told me, you a Tutsi? I said, yes, I'm a Tutsi. So you are here in this place where they are killing Tutsis, with no fear. I said, no, it's not a matter of being fearful or whatever. I have a position as a journalist of being alive. He said, no, you have no position of being alive because they're killing everybody. They're killing intellectuals, they're killing businessmen, they're killing journalists. So the only reason that you're alive is to bear witness. Us Jews, he told me, children of survivors of the Shoah, we understood that we had a duty after the Shoah to be teachers of the world, to bear a moral and ethical responsibility to make sure that whatever they called never again doesn't remain simply a speech, it becomes materialized. So he gave me that homework, all right? So, but how do you become a Jew? It's easy to say you won, but I have no knowledge whatsoever. But right after I got interested into Israel, so I had made like 100 trips to Israel. I know that you've met with Martine Saint-Victor. She was the producer of the program that I did called My Israel, which is a summary of all the love that I developed on Israel, because any time that I was invited to go to Israel, it was mainly for political reason, to cover some conflicts with the Gaza Strip or whatever. But every time I will bump into someone who has an amazing story, a Shoah survivor, a refugee who came back from Yemen and who's building life again. So for me, I understood that being a Jew is being alive and to spread life, actually. And I remember the Dalai Lama that I interviewed once, he told me, you know, there's a good reason why the most beautiful roses grow du fumier. I don't know how to put it in English, le fumier. So it's from death that you can grow the most beautiful life. So I grew up understanding that being a Jew, being in Israel, being in connection with this community is the greatest way of being alive. So my program, my TV program was exactly about that. I was going to tell people everything but politics, what you need to know about tourism, history, food, culture, love, music, laughter, humor, everything that defines these people who came from the grave, actually, and they made it. They made the most thriving country. They made the most modern country after being butchered in a most horrible way that any human can imagine. So I felt like being part of this community is not only a personal journey, but it was a social responsibility for me, just to be able to be part of the torch bearers, because we bear torch of keeping lights in the world where there's a lot of darkness. So your question was, what would do we have to do? And actually, I think the first thing that we need to do as a community is to understand how much we represent life. Because I feel like most of the Jews feel like their history is the one of Shoah, is one of the pogroms, it's one of the anti-Semitism, it's one of all the killings, all the bad things. But for me, it's one of being the light of the humanity. And it's a very joyful story, actually. It's a very positive story. So once we understand that, I think we'd be more comfortable into lending a helping hand to other communities, whether they ask for it or not, because most of the people will feel like, and I know from the Black community, they say, these people have gone through a lot. Do we really to ask them a bit more of a commitment? It will be too much to ask them. Actually, they have the responsibility of minding their own lives and their own survival. We don't need to ask anything from them. So I think if we start spreading the news that no, we're not a community of the dead, we are the community of the livings, I think people will come really gladly to learn from all of us. Actually, to share a story with you, I'm working with Sarah. We're trying to develop a project in the northern region of Canada, in Nunavut, where we try to build a connection with Israel, Rwanda, and the Indian communities to teach them the resilience, because I belong now to the two people who after the genocide, respective genocide, build the most joyful, successful, and thriving, imposing, and influential communities in the world. Now, in Rwanda is one of the most developed country in Africa, and actually, everybody's looking at Rwanda as the model that all the countries should be looking at. The same thing with Israel, with its modernity, with its fearless democracy, which sometimes breeds bad leaders, sometimes bring exceptional leaders, but it's a democracy that we've not seen anywhere else in the world. So we have a lot to teach, and not by saying we've suffered, but by saying we've survived and we've made it, and we've made it not as a weak people, but as the strongest people we can imagine. So whenever I'm within this community, and whenever I'm in, especially when I'm at the shul, it's my moment. It's my moment of feeling this greatness that grows in me and empowers me. And I know we have to be humble when we coming toward God and whatever that we've been taught. But actually, it's not the case with me. Whenever I'm coming there, I really feel like I'm one of the strongest men alive. And yes, so I want us to be mouthy and to talk a lot, to shout, and not to remain silent.
Well, Francois, it's a very inspiring um, part of your journey that you share with us, and being in that moment amidst your own Shoah, your own genocide in Rwanda in the bar with Bernard-Henri Lévy, and then studying with Rabbi Moses. It's incredibly inspiring. And the way that you have been able to see this connection between the communities, especially this new project that you're working on, I think is really interesting in terms of the larger lessons of allyship, how we move from inside of our community and make our own internal Jewish community stronger and more pluralistic and more respectful and hospitable, and then bring that light, as you said, bearing that torch out into the larger world is really, it's the work that we're supposed to be thinking of on Yom Kippur. And so if I turn to the words, the second part of the words of Isaiah now, where he calls us as we're fasting now during this Yom Kippur moment, and he looks at us and he says, why is it that when you fast, you don't see? You're starving your bodies, but you pay no heed. And then he goes on to criticize the Jewish community. And I want to ask you what you think we can learn or think about in this time as a springboard from the prophet's words. He says, "Halo zeh tzom evarchehu, pateach chartzubot resha hater agudot mota, veshalach retzutzim chofshim, v'chol mota tenateku." This is the fast that I desire, the prophet says, to unlock fetters of wickedness, to untie the cords of yokes. Let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke. So what is it that you think we can learn from the prophet's words right now as we're in this Yom Kippur moment that might be able to inspire us to be able to bring more of that light in a concrete way into the world as Jews? What are some concrete things that we can do as individuals that we can think about during this season to make a difference, to bring more light into a darkened world?
I think when you are fasting, and allow me to go a little bit distant. Last year, I was fasting in Kinshasa. I was in Congo during a business trip, and so I went into fast. And when you're traveling in those third world countries as a Westerner, you are privileged, right? You live in the fanciest hotels, you have a full meal, and sometimes you feel like you don't respect enough those people struggling to survive in those countries, because you feel like they're not responsible enough, they're not mindful enough, they're not organized enough, and you teach, you criticize, you realize, you notice their weaknesses rather than being mindful of your own weaknesses. So when I was fasting, and it was only 25 hours, right? It's not a big deal. And I knew that after that I was going to be in festive meal. I was invited there by the Chabad. So I knew that I was going to be treated very, very well. So it was only 25 hours. But I remember that my driver had told me that sometimes if he doesn't have clients like me coming in the country and making do business, he spent few days without eating, 3 days, 5 days. And sometimes he'll just skip a meal to allow his children to eat. So when I was fasting and feeling this, not pain, because not that much painful, but this consciousness of my body, my being, I get connected to those other people. And I felt like if I was in their shoes, all right, living what they go through, would I want people to come and criticize and just noticing what I'm doing wrong? Or would I have liked to just have someone extending his hand? And his hand can be just a mouthful hand. It can be just a small speech. It can be just making this extra leg of going to read a different news than the ones from my own community. Rabbi, you cannot imagine how many times I've spoken with people in our congregation or the one before, because I was at Beth-El, and who were just discovering my story, right? So who were discovering, not my story, my personal story doesn't matter, but the story of other people being taken through other excruciating experiences, right? So they know much about Shoah, they've heard about the anti-Semitism, they've heard all about that, but they were honestly, genuinely discovering that there is racism. There is another genocide that took place in some foreign countries in Africa. They've been told from time to time that that's their customs. You know, after all, those like people in Africa, they are accustomed into killing each other from one village to another one. So it's not a big deal. It's a common thing that takes place in those third world countries. So by making them discover that me, part of the community, me, one of them, I belong also to the other story, and that's not true. That we were born to kill each other, and we were not born to be, whatever they speak about. I think they were discovering something. So I think in this moment, when we realize how small we are, because we realize that just one glass of water, after all, makes a huge difference in our singular lives. By 25 hours, not having a right to put anything in the mouth, how we get affected, and how we can sometimes even lose our clear mind thinking. And if we can seize this moment and learn, because by learning, we understand, and by understanding, we know what we have to do to make things better. I honestly believe that every member of our community knows what to do. And it's not a big deal. It's not a money thing. It's not a business thing. It's not a political, it's not even a lobbying thing. It's simply by giving a nod to the other people, by noticing, by telling, I understand, I know, and I hear what you've been through. That is already enough. It's already huge. And you would ask any beggars in the street, he will say, yes, give me money, it's one thing, but your smile is even bigger than the $5 bill that you'd give me. So I think by understanding, by giving a smile to the other communities, by nodding the head, telling them, I hear you, I understand, I can see how frustrated you are, I can see how you are suffering. That will be already a huge step and a huge commitment from our community toward the world. And again, as I told you in the beginning, when I was speaking with Bernard Lévy, and actually we had a third Jew with us, and in that room it was Bernard Kouchner, because he was back then he was working for the French government, and Bernard Kouchner. And actually after Bernard Lévy had said all this speech that he was sermoning me, Bernard Kouchner told me, oh, by the way, you understand that it's not a suggestion or recommendation, it's an obligation. So in a way, if everybody from our community would understand that it's not a good gesture that we're doing by extending our eyes, our commitment, our heart to other communities. It's not a recommendation from the rabbi or from Francois or for anybody who's talking to them, but it's a mandate, it's a mitzvah, it's an obligation that this is one of the elements that we are going to be judged upon our latter days. It will be an incredible exercise. If we can do it for this moment of time, it will be amazing.
Well, Francois, I think you're really challenging all of us to reconsider what it means to be a Jew in the pew, and then to walk in the world after you come out of the synagogue, that we are mitzuveh, um, and that we have a mitzvah. That means that we are commanded. And I think the way that you put it is incredibly powerful. And I'm just wondering, just to understand and drill down a little further. So what do you think what are you saying the commandment, the obligation is? Is it to be empathic, or is it to be compassionate to the other?
It's starting by being present. We're not there. We don't talk about those stories. In our sermon, we share stories about the Jews. We share stories about what's happening in Israel. We're very sensitive about what is happening there. And we don't often talk about it, just by existing, for start, by being present. And then the emotion will build naturally. Depending on the person who's in front of you, you'd feel emphatic if you are in front of someone who's already being committed and who knows how to fight, how to survive. For others who are in an even weaker position, they simply need to feel like there's an empathy and that
Mm-hmm.
we understand. This is a debate that I'm having in my family, when this Black Lives Matter movement began, because we have 4 kids, right? One of
Mm-hmm.
is my son, and who's a mix, but he's mostly Black, and I have 3 kids now who are white. So I was telling them, look, my son Kenzo is a football player. He wants to go to study to the US. So put yourselves in my shoes as a parent, knowing that the country that my son loves the most is a country when he goes to live there. I'll be fearful every moment, right? I will be thinking, is he back home? And so Sarah was telling me, yes, you're gonna become a Jew mother, a Jewish mother who's always in the anguish. So we are now 2 mothers in the house, right? There's no husband and wife. There's 2 mothers in the same house. So basically, by just understanding what a parent like me would go through, may be going through, it's already a huge step. Just let's exist in this storytelling, and try to find the connection between those stories and ours. And just by sitting with the Black community or the Black people or Black friends, doesn't have to have a political involvement. It could be just a singular person, and share with him your own story. It empowers him. It makes him understand that other people have been really down in the graves, and they marched up and to build a country, community, a nation, and whatever, however you call it. So just by being part of this conversation would be already huge, humongous steps. No matter what kind of emotion that you put into, if it's empathy, if it's whatever, but just saying, I hear you and I notice you. I feel like you exist. That will be already an incredible step for all of us.
So it's taking part of the language of both the liturgy and what Levinas spoke as the muvwasi is the hineni, is to say, I'm
Mm,
here, I'm present to witness not just the obligation to witness the travesty and the catastrophe, but I'm here to hear your story, and I'm here to be present to acknowledge you, which I think is incredibly powerful. And that's a really tangible first step that I think everyone can do to this year, to think of one person, one friend, both maybe in the community and one friend that I want to make outside of my community and out of my comfort zone, to learn to listen and to be present to their stories. Can you just tell us, if you wouldn't mind, you told us the story of becoming a Jewish mother about Kenzo, and I hope he succeeds with his football endeavors. You mentioned to me, I think, that Noah and Maya are in Israel now. So
yeah.
what are they doing? What's the other side of the Jewish mother and you feeling? right now.
Sarah and I, we don't sleep. We have 7 hours of time differential. So by the time we go to bed, it's early in the morning for them. So we know everything they're going through. We know everything they're eating. We know what they've taken in classes, and we
Hmm.
know what is the kind of meal they're having.
But
So
they're in lockdown now in Tel
yeah,
Aviv, right? Originally they were in Jerusalem. So tell us what they've been up to.
so they left school because after the first day of Rosh Hashanah, the school had closed, and they cannot go back to school because with these new rules of confinement that have been addicted, they are in an Airbnb. Thankfully, the eldest one, Noah, is going to be joining the army next year, and one of our their neighbor actually in that Airbnb is another young man who came from France and who's now in military. So he's teaching her what she will be going through and stuff. But the other thing which is very interesting, when they were here, when I became a Jew, I unfortunately became very unpopular in this house because obligated everybody to have kosher meal, right? Because they were the type of the Jews, they were born Jews, so they didn't feel like there was much effort to put into in fulfilling some of the mitzvot. So the burgers were actually cheeseburgers. So when I converted, I obliged everybody to to no longer put cheese and meat. And as you can imagine, among the children, was not very popular, right? So anytime that we'd do some seders for Pesach, for Rosh Hashanah, it was like, oh, I was dragging them and I was forcing them. So now that they are there in Israel, where they feel entirely immersed into the Jewishness, right? But in the same time, being in a liberal city and being able to be in both, they wanted to be with us in a Zoom exchange in the beginning of the Rosh Hashanah. So they're feeling now that what we have been trying to do in the last years was not a religious, simply exercise. It was also part of making them understand that they belong to a family, to a greater family. So I think they're starting to appreciate it, and that's really interesting for us. And again, I know that people who are in distance feel like being in Israel, it's being in a danger zone. Actually, uh, that part of the story doesn't bother me. As I told you, I've been numerous times in Israel. I know how matter of security and safety is one obsession of every authority. So that part doesn't bother me really at all about the daily life. What bothers me is to keep on this connection that I feel like they're growing up, they're making up their own lives, they're becoming their own person. And as I told you, as a Jewish mother, I feel like they should remain in my nest and in our nest and not having. So I'm fighting the natural course of life of aging, which is a big struggle, and I know that I'm gonna fail.
Well, Francois, I want to wish you and your entire family a kativa v'chatima tova. As we say, this is the season to really focus in, as you really have inspired us and taught us so much Torah today and how to bring the words of the prophet into our lives, that we have an obligation not only to tell our stories, but to listen to the stories of others in our lives, those that are part of our family, part of our extended family, and beyond the Jewish family and the Israeli family, part of the human family. And my hope and prayer is that we are inspired by your words and that you continue to inspire others in the incredibly important and holy work that you do. So continue to be a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for this.
Terrific. That was amazing, Francois. You're a natural. You're amazing.
Oh,
I think what we'll do is maybe if you wouldn't mind, I mean, we'll have to think about where we're going to do it down the road. Like I did this Bima dialogue with Martine. I don't know if you were there when she came to visit during a Shabbat when we were having normal services, but let's think about a time if there's an anniversary on the Rwandan calendar, when you commemorate something that's important, maybe reach out to me and let me know if you think that would be a good time to tell the story. I'm not sure always. I'm conflicted about Yom HaShoah. I think that Yom HaShoah has to still tell the Shoah stories, but I think it also has to translate it into other genocides as well. So I'm open to conversations about how we can find ways to tell the story. And I think your story is really compelling and you tell it in a very inspiring way. So let's just stay connected about that. Obviously, I'm always here for you as your rabbi, but if you can think of times where it would be an opportune moment on the calendar, either the Hebrew calendar or the Rwandan calendar or whatever, the human calendar. This is a time
Mhm.
where we need to tell this story. Just send a note to Roseanne and say, I have an idea, Rabbi, what do you think? And I'm very open to listening and to learning and to sharing those stories. And I'd love to collaborate with you, with Martine. If there's other people you think I should meet and the community needs to meet to hear their stories, please let me know, okay?
I do for sure.
All
I
right, so
do.
send my
Count on
blessings to
me.
everyone. Stay safe and sound.
I will.
And that should be
And I'm sorry for this technical glitch. And
no, no, it's all good. It's all good. And thanks for your permission to and the time to put this up. It's going to be on the site. Martine's going to have a piece up there, and then I may have one other person, a rabbi who does um, civil rights work and interreligious work at Hebrew College, a friend of mine named Rabbi Or Rose. I'm going to have them like as thumbnails. So as you're streaming and doing things, I want people to look at other activities as well. Like we have some
mhm.
things for the kids, but I just feel like it would be irresponsible for me this year. I'm not talking about it directly in my sermons because I feel also that it's less authentic if I tell a story that has to come from you or
Mm.
from Martine and from others. So I want to use this time to put it up. We're going to try to get it up now. I'm going to now say farewell to you and start working on the editing to get it up on the site.
Best of luck with that. Thank you
Okay,
so
thanks,
much.
Francois.
See
Kativa
you on
Tova.
Shabbat.
Take care.
Shalom.
Take care.
Bye.
Hatima